Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 362nd meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. This is a weekly series of talks by people who make comics, people who write about comics, people who think about comics in some way. It's founded by cartoonist and educator Ben Catcher about a decade ago. My name's Austin English. I've been helping out Ben with this season and the last season. We are very, very excited for tonight's guest to be Amy Lockhart. Amy is someone whose work I've really loved for, I think I first saw it about 15 years ago. I have this drawing with me here that I'm going to show to the camera. This is, maybe Amy will have a different way to describe it, or maybe I'm describing it in the wrong way, but I always thought of it as kind of like an animation cell or something that was supposed to resemble an animation cell. And I've carried it with me from apartment to apartment. I lived overseas for a couple years, and I brought it with me because I think it's just such a beautiful, work of art. And the way that Amy has just composed the face of this character is just so perfect and powerful. And I think Amy has works with drawings, works with comics, works with animation, and I think from medium to medium, that same kind of like the same simple choices made in such a perfect and powerful way retain themselves from project to project. And fans of her work would certainly know what I'm talking about. And so we are, the symposium is supposed to be a free-form lecture series where artists are invited and they can speak about whatever they want. And most of the time, people will speak about their own work, their own publishing history, a current publishing or artistic process, just relating more to themselves that they want to talk about. And that's, of course, completely welcome. But we're really excited that Amy took this opportunity to do a presentation on Charles Burchfield, which, a favorite artist of mine, and I'm sure many others. So I'm very excited to hear that. The symposium encourages audience participation. So if you're watching this and you have something that something occurs to you as Amy is speaking, and you have a question, please just write it in the chat. You can either read your question out loud after the presentation is over. I can read it for you. But we will make sure to get to any questions and comments you have for Amy. So I'm going to read this bio really quickly. Amy Lockhart is a filmmaker, animator, and artist. Her animations have screened at festivals nationally and internationally, including the British Film Institute, New York Anthology Film Archives, Arbor Film Festival, Carnegie Mellon, and International Animation Festival in Hiroshima, Japan. Her drawings, comics, and paintings have been published by Fantagraphics. Her book Ditch Life came out in 2020. Drawn and Quarterly, Dirty Dishes from 2009, and by Color Code, Looking Inward, 2016. Her animations are in the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Experimental Animation Archive. So without further ado, here is Amy Lockhart.
Hi, I was muted. Thanks for thanks for having me. Thanks for a really nice intro. I'm going to just do this. Okay. Okay, great. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm gonna talk to you today about Charles Burchfield, an amazing artist. I'm hoping maybe someone here hasn't ever heard of them. I was introduced to him a few years ago, and it's just like such an amazing discovery. He has over like 4,000 pieces of art. It's insane. If you go online and you just start digging, it's crazy the amount of information you can have, and his work is like mind-blowing. He sort of existed almost like as an outsider artist that kind of like wove in and out of this art establishment, sort of dipping in, kind of tied to the regionalist movement, but wasn't really down with it. It was too chauvinistic and too much about like turf wars, I guess, something like that. But it was just a great example of someone doing their own thing and not being like subsumed by art or what they think they should be, or not wasting their time arguing with the art world, just doing their thing. This is Charles Burchfield in his studio, and I also just want to thank there's people who do like amazing research on him, like Nancy Weekly, Burchfield Penny Art Center, amazing works website. John Bauer, Matthew Bagel, all these people's books I've read. So I just would like to thank them for using all of their research. Okay, so let's do this. Okay. So Charles Burchfield, and I'm going to talk about his work, talk about a bit of his life, and then also related to comics and animation. He's an American artist known for his amazing watercolors and landscapes, mostly of Salem, Ohio, and Buffalo, New York. His paintings focused on his emotional reaction to his environment, and he seemed to connect to a greater power through nature and the natural world. He spent his youth communing with nature, hanging out in the woods, studying and sketching nature using watercolor paints, and reading. Supposedly, he read every John Burroughs book at the local library, although they didn't say how many books were there. That's my little joke. So John Burroughs was an American naturalist and nature essayist, active in the conservation movement. He is linked to John Muir, the father of national parks, who famously referred to domesticated livestock as hoofed locusts. Like Burchfield, Burroughs was less of a scientific naturalist and more of a literary naturalist with a duty to record his own unique perceptions of the natural world. So again, not about looking at nature through science, but really going in there and getting down with nature, sort of thing. Both of their favorite months were March, April. They were enamored with their childhood. They love to live apart from mainstream. And they're also really into sounds of animals, sounds of birds, and how it set the tone for the atmosphere and of the area they were in, sort of thing. Let's go here. So, oops. And then here's some he's got great quotes. Again, I think the idea of if someone's doing landscapes and out in nature is that somehow everything has to be pleasant and pretty and whatever. But he's just got all these great, keeps lots of journals, great tormented things. And one thing about nature, he liked to actually be out in nature. He liked the weather. He liked the bugs. He liked all the things that people think are uncomfortable. He loved this stuff. So he had this great quote: "I like to think of myself as an artist in being in a nondescript swamp, alone, up to my knees in mire, painting the vital beauty I see there on my own in my own way, not caring a damn about tradition or anyone's opinion." And this is a great, okay, we're not going to do that. That's a great painting right there that he did. I think it's from 2017, in the swamp. And then here, so drawing, I'm going to talk a bit about his drawing practice because this is comics. It was integral to his practice. He started again in his youth, sort of studying nature, really using the tools like watercolors, pencils, all that stuff of naturalists, which sort of led into his watercolor practice. He has some great nature studies, as well as lots of just notes and doodles. He used to call them his idea notes that he would keep, and he had a great practice of archiving everything. So he would go out, sketch all of this stuff, have these wild, loose doodles, have more scientific, realistic ones, store them away in these sort of little folders with mood, wind, fantasy that he would use later in paintings. And you can see out throughout his whole process, he's always evolving and changing and reworking his past work, which is really cool. He also kept this, it's really cool, sorry. He also kept this journal, these great journals, and he would often go back to them and re-edit them and stuff like that. So there was this sort of sculptural process to his practice. Same with when he was drawing, he would often go out into the bush, into the trees, the forest, whatever you want to call it, and just start observing stuff. And then he would find a point of focus and sort of edit everything in the picture to highlight that point of focus or highlight that mood or that element. Yeah, so here are notebooks, Sun and Rocks, where he collected notes on Sun and Rocks, as well as all of his journals there. Here's some great doodles that he called, what did he call them again? Exercises in free exercises in abstraction. So this is where he would do more of his, come up with his motifs and symbols and just like that sort of wacky, wild imagery he would come up with. Some pretty good stuff. I love this caterpillar guy in the top right. Pretty sweet. Oh yeah, and then there's these are more finished drawings. I just wanted to include them. Again, more of like this twisted sort of dark goth element in some of his stuff. And this is from the 60s, I think. One's 55 on the right, 60s on the left. So it's more not as loose, more fine-tuned, that sort of thing. Here's some other great ones. I love the one on the left. These are more, not a lot of his work is like this, so I just wanted to include it. I also like a tree, like a grinning skull on the first spring beauty. That's the title of the one on the left. And the one on the right, a wood sprawling like a skeleton of a prehistoric monster. So I just love this sort of like dark humor he almost had to stuff, which was great. Here is a journal he had, or scrapbook that his wife Bertha kept, and him kept, of all of his accomplishments, goings on, that sort of thing. Again, really more almost like an outsider artist, that idea of keeping too much, creating your own mythology, creating your own narrative. He said if he wasn't an artist, he would have been a storyteller, which I feel like you can tell in his sort of approach to his own work and myth, as well as just his images that work almost like moments in a film, like single frames in a film where they're still images, but they vibrate with life and they seem like a vibe, an atmosphere, a place, sort of thing. So this is an early poster he did in gouache. The one on the right is a watercolor, and the left is, I think it was actually the cover of a book. So early influences. In 1912, 1916, he attended the Cleveland School of Art in Ohio. He first came in and he wanted to be a designer and illustrator, but then decided to be an artist. So you can see throughout it, he's got like just insane design chops. And I think if so many of his images are just filled with like chaotic pattern, but they're so tight, they have depth, they have a point of focus. It's just like amazing. And I relate that back to just his crazy design chops. He was an amazing at just using simple things like tone, color, line quality to just separate images and create focused imagery. And then, so yeah, big success at the school. The dean called him a genius, won many poster competitions. He has notes in his early journals and on drawings that are like conventionalize in broad masses. He always talks about conventionalize and caricature, go to caricature. So just shows that drive throughout his sort of artistic practice of going almost towards, someone's like caricature wasn't a dirty word then, it wasn't so separated, maybe art and comics, but it was just really intertwining it in a seeming like a casual, organic way, sort of thing. And then he had this great professor, Henry Keller, who was a big influence on him. He introduced him to like a wide variety of artists. So he's in Cleveland, Ohio, away from New York, which is the big art center, the Armory show, a big modernist, the Europeans getting down, Americans getting down. Oh my God, modernism, crazy. So that's happening in New York at like 1913. But still, he kind of remains a bit removed from it and not really, again, getting sucked in or thinking he has to be something that he's not. His professor Heller helped that, in that he would expose him to all this stuff, but wouldn't prioritize sort of Eurocentric views, and showed lots of like Asian stuff, lots of stuff around the world. Also told him to focus on what was around him and look for inspiration in that, which sort of led to that regionalist bent, like painting, scene painter, and all of that, which he just sort of came to. He was an avid reader again, and he loved written descriptions of landscapes and also artists who created symbols to describe nature. Here is some awesome drawings he did of sunflowers. Like Heller, he loved sunflowers. I'm gonna try to get rid of this. Oh, I'm not gonna do it. Anyways, and then he has this great quote on the side, talking about how glorious as sunflowers are. They're better when they're dead because they're nicer to draw, and marvel of intricate twisted forms, that sort of thing. Again, I just love his twisted little sense of humor or sense of being. Sort of influence of Asian art and its use of caricature and symbols. So I'm going to talk about that. In 1915, he cited the influence of Japanese artists Hokusai and Hiroshige in his journals. So that's Hokusai on the left and Hiroshige on the right. Hokusai was a bohemian classic loner man who painted not what he saw, but what he felt. exaggerating shape and color to express its subjective experience of reality as truth, and to shape landscape to fit his imagination. So in a sense, caricature. Hiroshima was technical conformist, focused on representing exactly what his eye saw in an attempt at truth and objectivity. So realist. Burchfield was a fan of Hokusai and cited him as one of his favorite artists. This makes sense because Burchfield's realism really comes from caricature, I find. So there's a great quote by Georgia O'Keeffe. Nothing is less real than realism. Details are confusing. It is only by selection, by elimination, by emphasis that we get the real meaning of things. So caricature is essential to visual storytelling, especially in comics and animation. Quote by Leslie Bishko, animator. Creating animated movement is a triadic process of experience, observation, and description. The animator's uniqueness comes through selection of perceptual biases from experience and observation in the natural world. Basically, animation is a translation of lived experience and must be simplified and exaggerated to be readable. And how you do that gives it your own style. So like that idea of cartoon physics, if you included all the information, you couldn't tell what the point is of what you're trying to do. And then a great quote by Burchfield. An artist must paint not what he sees in nature, but what is there. To do so, he must invent symbols, which, if properly used, make his work seem even more real than what is in front of him. And then here are some early works by Burchfield from, I think, 2016, something like that. And I love these. In some of them, you can see these amazing dark silhouette shapes, like the one in the middle, the trees. And I wonder too if that was sort of influenced by the Japanese artists and that sort of thing. And you can see sort of it coming together. Here, next slide. Another influence was while he was working at the Hatch Galleries in Cleveland as a security guard, around 1913, he saw this exhibition of Chinese scroll paintings. So the scrolls are viewed left to right, and the viewer sort of experiences them as they walk along them. They also contain many symbols and motifs to describe weather. You can see some here of the Chinese art symbols on the left, and then there's a close-up of ones just of the weather bottom right. So what interested Burchfield most was their telescoping of time, which led to his all-day sketches, where he would sit out and draw the different phases of the day on one page. And that summer, he made hundreds of sketches of the sky over Salem and the countryside. So it's sort of this idea of, again, creating an image that it's time. It's like comics, it shows time, animation that shows time, that sort of thing. Here's an early all-day sketch where you can see he's just taking notes on colors and things that happen and things that change. Here's another one, some writing again around 1915. Here is where he's breaking down the symbols and sort of creating his own motifs. And so you've got these great sort of clouds, again, almost in that comics zone, which is kind of great. Here's one where he wrote a little note about it, talking about how he's using this shape, this zigzag shape, to translate, to communicate sunlight rippling, that effect of being out in the woods. And it's not just one image you're looking at, but you're looking at all this light changing, all this sound and this haze and this atmosphere. So it's really interesting to see this. Again, 1915, he's trying to figure this out. This is a sketch of a house, his early work, and you can see in the clouds by the windows of the house, sort of again developing those symbols, those shapes to communicate weather, to communicate things that can't be seen or held or touched, that sort of thing, and how he's bringing it in as formal elements within his work, which is really cool. He's also just like a master of almost creating tone with texture, and that patches of harmonic sort of a harmonious, texture that work as just sections. So as crazy as this could be with all the lines in the background with the trees, and then you have at the front of the house all of the lines going on, because they're in their own little pockets in their sections, it still remains focused, and you can almost blur your eyes and it becomes like a tone. Here's a later work where he's showing the changing of seasons. So not only was he into wanting in one picture to show the all day, the changing of the times, he wants to show the changings here. And again, he was like, I loved winter to spring, March, April. And this is going from winter to spring across it. You can see like his amazing bold line mixed in there with some nice hazy action. This is just like a beautiful picture of a sky. I forget when it's done from, could be later work, but I just love it because it's one of those pictures that just hits me as like, it's real. I can feel this, like I can feel the depth. I can feel, he's like hit on all just the elements that express the feeling of being in this place and experiencing that big, overwhelming sky, and how it's so bright it is that the earth is dark, all of that stuff, and hitting on it where this is more real to me than if I were to take a picture, because it would be sort of far away and something distant from me that I'm looking at, and this is something that I'm feeling that's like making my eyes happy. This is just sort of a process drawing. A sketch of the sky was sort of painted in, and it's from this great catalog about weather from, again, Burchfield Penny Art Center. Amazing place. So he goes to school. He's loving it. He's going out into the woods, painting stuff. Everyone loves him. Life is great. He graduates from art school, and he gets a scholarship to go to the National Academy of Design in New York City. So he heads there, he's going to art school, and then he goes to his first class, which is figure drawing. They sit him down and they're going to be drawing like a bust of a human. So he drops out. He's like, this is not for me. I'm not feeling drawings. He's not getting any inspiration from it. It's just not his scene. So he ends up just hanging around New York a bit. He feels bad, a bit like a failure, like he's let everyone down. At the same time, he is hanging out at the Sunwise Turn bookstore, which is this amazing bookstore run. It was started by Mary Mowbray Clark, and Madge Jennison. And it was sort of set, it was almost like a relational aesthetics project. They referred to it as a store was a living art project. Madge described it as a new kind of bookshop, one that celebrated the livingness of books and spread the current of new ideas like electricity. They created reading lists, published small editions, plays, almost published Ulysses in the US, brought in international writing, hosted art shows and readings, pretty much like a cultural force. Mary was really supportive of Charles's work, had an art show there, tried to even convince him to stay in New York when he wanted to leave, and funny stories. And then it was especially funny. Madge wrote this book about it, Human Comedy of Bookselling. So they were anti-capitalist. They just wanted to have this cool place. Apparently the walls were orange, the couch was purple, the chairs like this blue. They're creating this space, putting in ideas together, putting in international books, creating reading lists for people, and just sort of this chaotic, beautiful scene. Later on, the fun fact, it eventually shut down because there wasn't interest in it and people just want to read like detective novels. But for a minute, it was like this amazing art that happened. Fun fact, Peggy Guggenheim, which was the cousin of this other guy that was in there trying to help them run it, who was a more practical guy. She worked as the shop as a volunteer. She was a horrible bookseller. They would just get her to sweep the floors and go buy light bulbs. But she later wrote that Mary was like a goddess to me. And it was there that she developed her lifelong passion for art collecting. And it's great. It's amazing. I'm so glad I found out about this through trying to figure out what Charles Burchfield's up to. And then, so he leaves New York. He's hanging out in New York with Charles for a couple months. He's going to museums a lot and studying like Indian, Persian, Chinese art. Again, looking at those symbols, really into like the way that they're expressing the untouchable, intangible through symbols and that sort of thing. Funny story, he was about to leave. Mary didn't want him to leave. The night he was supposed to leave, his friend or roommate came and said, hey, you sold a piece of art. And I think it was an attempt. He thinks Mary just bought it to try to convince him to stay. But he still left, and he used that $25 to pay back his brother, who he had to loan to get the money to take the train back home. So he leaves New York. He's worried at first, again, going back home, he's going to be embarrassed. People are going to be mad that he wasted the scholarship, but everyone welcomes him back. He gets his job at Mellon's metal factory again, which he worked during high school and throughout art school, I think. And then just working like day job, painting during his lunch breaks and his time off. And he was just like loving it. It was considered his sort of golden year, 1917. Coming back from the big city, realizes he doesn't need it, trying to get back to that feeling he had before he went away of just being able to connect with nature and be so inspired by it and be inspired by the sound and sort of, I don't know if you spend time in the woods, like that thing of sometimes you can see a tree and it's just a tree, and sometimes you can just really experience it and it's like this otherworldly thing of this hum and all this stuff going on. So he was getting back into that stuff. And then, oh yeah, he's focused on drawing weather, landscapes. Oh yeah, and he developed some rules, like using limited color palette and only 4 tonal values. When I read that, it explains so much because his work again is so tight. And if you take a lot of his images and you just switch them to black and white, they're still really powerful. And like the focus is there, the design is there. So he just had such a great, as wild as his colors are, he had such a great handle on tone and using tone for depth and also to create points of interest and stuff like that. So yeah, his tight design coupled with an intense personal understanding and relationship with his environment allowed him to create seemingly abstract images that were more than realism. Yeah, and then this is One of a Sky, and then on the one I forget, Childhood Garden, something like that. Sort of a biggie, really reminiscing about childhood and lots of studies and kind of amazing stuff. Here we go. Here's some more from the golden period. So you can see there are a lot more, the penmanship, it almost feels like drawing with a pen, whereas his later stuff became a bit more hazy painterly. This seems like a more drawer painterly to me, where the lines are crisper, but he's still working with like crazy textures. Like there's so many textures and patterns going on, like the one on the left, but it's so solid at the same time. And just being able to bring in like the blue on the windows and just be like, oh yeah, that's not a problem, even though it's so pure and like popping so hard, but it just melds in with everything so well. Same with the one on the right, just hitting that thing with that haze around the hole in the silhouette where you can see the light coming through. Just again hitting on that realism of what it feels like to see light go through things. This is another beautiful one, just very simple. I love this sort of white ghost tree on the left that's just hanging out. But again, really nice, so loose. If you look at it through one way and you just look at how loose the patterns are, it can seem very 2D. But then if you let yourself relax and or sort of see it as depth, that the sky and all the lines in the sky going from, more saturated to unsaturated, bigger spaces to smaller spaces, it just creates this really solid depth within it, which is kind of amazing. Here's some more pieces. Again, lyrical one on the right, messier, brush strokes, that sort of thing, and playing with that haze. Here's another one. I love, again, with those early lines that are, again, more like a pen than a hazy brush. But you can feel, like, I can feel this. I understand those the high contrast brown and yellow at the back, like being in the forest and seeing that break in it, and there's that sunny spot, and just like, and he's got these amazing framing devices where you have the trees at the front that are so solid and green and dense, again with like amazing, like a lot of patterns going on, but really a solid sort of tonal zone, and then this beautiful moment in the middle where it's like way more contrast, way more dynamic in its lights and darks and that sort of thing. But yeah, again, good old framing devices. Who doesn't love a framing device? Here is another one, again, more of the somber one. He loves a dark hole in a tree, or he's like talked about being drawn to them. But again, there's something just so, like, it just draws you in, and that idea of focus. So he has this haze going on in the background, elements the back of the sort of hole is a bit hazy. The grass hanging down from it is a bit like hazy and muddled, but then you have this beautiful crisp white flower in the bottom right that just really brings your attention. Again, that idea of like small little areas of high contrast, the human eye is just like, meow, let me have that. So it's just like this great moment and this great focus and also just depth in this really, in a lot of ways, muddy picture, if you look around the edges of it. So yeah, and then I'm going to talk to you now about optical effects to create sense and motion, bringing it back into comics and animation. So here's another two early works as well. So in his work, he used a lot of vibrating line and texture and symbols to express weather, which are similar to the use of speed, weather and sound sort of thing, the intangible. So it's similar to the use of speed lines and smears in comics and animation. So in order to express movement and still images of comics and manga, artists often use speed lines. These are, we all know them, I'm sure, but they're just like, you know, if I have something moving, I'm going to draw some lines behind it to sort of indicate that it's moving fast and dust is kicking up, so that kind of thing. So I have some examples from Fist of the North Star. And then similarly, speed lines are used in low budget animation to imply movement rather than having to draw it. So let's move along. So here is just a random picture of an optical effect. So that idea of it's one still image, it looks like it's moving, but just the placement of shape and color tricks our eyes and makes it move. This is a big thing that's used in animation. Animation is actually an optical effect. It's a series of drawings put together. It looks like it's moving. But a lot of stuff, you have to fake it and make it look like there's more movement than there actually is. Here's a Fist of the North Star, classic. So here you can see these great motion lines on the left. And it really does make me think of Burchfield in the way of having things that he's drawing sort of disappear into lines, sort of thing. You can see it on the hands. The nice kick Ken's giving to the big man is really nice. You can also see the impact lines, those sort of radiating lines, as well as the foot sort of kicking on the right sort of thing. Let's see. And then here, another great one where you have the double image. So this is again something that's used in animation where you double up images in a frame to give a sense of more movement. I'm going to talk about in a second, but also done within a comic. So this one image is showing a passage of time of this guy getting his face slapped back and forth sort of thing. So it's this beautiful arcing lines, the contorted faces, and then also these lines in the background swooshing back and forth to really amplify it. Again, on the right, that disappearing hand is really nice, shooting the weapon stick thing. But yeah, again, some really great radiating lines. And then let's go here. So this is from Dragon Ball Z. So this is an animation where people will often use speed lines in cheaper produced animation to imply movement where there is none. So you'll often have a still frame. Maybe it'll be like, if I'm supposed to be flying through the sky, my hair will be moving a little bit, but my body will be completely still. So I just have to draw, you know, a couple of frames of a moving hair blob. And then behind me, it'll be these great sort of abstract pattern of lines, which fakes movement, creates movement. Here is an example, not of that, but of speed lines as motion is happening to really exaggerate and help you feel impact. Here we go. Yes.
You're dead.
So that's that. And then this is one with him flying through the sky, and this is a more traditional speed lines. So you'll see it, he'll jump off, he'll fly through the sky, and you'll see the speed lines behind him. So again, beautiful speed lines. Okay, and then so that same idea, but on the flip side, is used in another form of animation. So you have still images with abstract patterns of vibrating lines that give the sense of more motion. But also when in more hand-drawn animation and earlier animation, the struggle was, how do you make something move across the screen really fast without it strobing? So in animation, frames, drawings have to sort of touch each other, almost like touch each other just a little bit. If there's too much space between them, between the drawings on the different frames, they strobe. So instead of something looking like it's moving across the screen, it looks like it's flashing across the screen. It is said that Tex Avery and Chuck Jones were sitting around one day and like, how fast can you make something move across the screen? And this is how they came up with smears, also called multiples and blurs. So it's this idea of faking. Again, animation is all about faking everything. So faking live action. When you film something with a live action camera and the movement is too fast, the shutter speed is too low, it's not taking enough fast pictures, there'll be blur within one picture. There'll also be multiples sometimes where you'll see multiple arms in one picture. So they took that idea and just stretched stuff. And these frames were used. So you'd have an action, excuse me, an action sequence, maybe on two. So for every drawing, you'd have, it would be on screen for 2 frames. So do. And then you would pop in one of these drawings that is just, it's this beautiful abstract drawing that is an optical effect for 1 frame. It's just supposed to be a blur, like a flash, like, did I see that sort of thing? And then you go back to the regular frames. So that's how it worked. In the early days, it was done mostly with a dry brush. So this is a cell on the left. So they would paint them all on the back, flip them over, I'm pretty sure, and then draw the sort of line. So this might have been done on the back of it too, but it's with a brush, paint's a bit dry, and then you get those nice effects. So here you can see the pan. You can see it within this image, the pan moving. Woody Woodpecker on the side, that's more multiples. So you have the dry brush lines that are more like a smear. And the idea why you call it a smear is it's like as if you had a wet drawing on a piece of paper and you put your thumb on it and dragged it in the direction you want it to move. It's that idea. So it's being smeared. So dry brush effect for that. And then multiples for the eyeballs, which is a really cool effect too, where you're, in a weird way, you're taking all the frames that you would need to make the action and compressing them together, but then you're designing them so that they infer movement rather than are the actual movement. So you wouldn't have eyeballs sitting on top of each other. You can see how they're designed. You can see even perspective is designed in it and the curve. If you just look at the eyeballs, where they grow bigger and they're on like the arc of those dry brush things. Same with the beak. So I love smears. There's websites dedicated to them, but it's just like these beautiful still 1 frame images that are totally abstract and weird, but also that you can see movement within, which are really nice. Here's one, Bugs Bunny, Donald Duck. Again, some really great like dry brush work. And again, you can see Donald Duck you got some multiples happening there, some dry brush, and you even have at the top of his finger that's attached to his arm, those sort of like crispy lines that you see more in like Asian smears that are just more like angular and almost like dematerializing rather than just like a solid blob or multiples. Here's some amazing ones from early Astro Boy. And the top right one made me really think of Charles Burchfield for some reason. But again, that idea of these forms that are dissolving and creating these patterns that sort of make you think of movement. On the left, like, I don't know what's happening, but I can sense where it's moving sort of thing. But yeah, really fantastic. Here is some in Burchfield's actual work. So again, this is his early work. And the one on the left, I think is for snow, that sort of thing, but you can actually see these speed lines happening and the sort of haze happening that really gives that feeling of something being blown towards you. It's a pretty literal use of sort of speed lines. The one on the right, I love this picture. I swear if I just like move my head around, I can almost see it glitter, but it's just like that mix, his like killer mix of these high contrasts, like the beach, the brown and the dark brown, black lines on top of it. And then you put that beside the haziness of the water, and especially the patch of light on it with the little lines for glitter. It just reads so well as just light floating on water. And it's just, it's good. Go Charles. Here's another great one. So again, his the way he drew weather and stuff like that, it wasn't always so aggressive, but he had these great ways of creating haze and atmosphere, which I love about this one, because it is very much like looking at a bunch of trees and they disappear where the light comes through. And he's really reduced it down to such a simple form, sort of thing, that it really does resonate as real as the feeling of it. I think it's also the light line, the light white lines coming from it that are going more vertical than horizontal, that really gives that feeling of something moving towards you, or this space or this haze, this atmosphere that you're in. Here's some more haze coming. He has some great ones where they'll just be like a drawing or a painting with this white blob, this kind of white haze happening in it. Here's some nice ones going up and down on the left, and this great zigzag shapes. Again, that feeling of looking at a bunch of trees, and where the sun sits behind them, it's like their trunks almost disappear and they dematerialize, but again, translating it into a zigzag shape and a repeated zigzag shape. So it's not just like an odd accident, but it's a pattern, it's a way of understanding and communicating, which is really cool. Here's, I think, I'm really bad with names. Here's autumnal something or other, later work, where his work got a lot more dense. But yeah, this is just like vibrating. He was really into birds and bird songs and trying to draw sound, that sort of thing. So you can see these great vibrating lines throughout it. These awesome, the tree knots sort of coming out, and then this great leaf in the middle, this orange leaf that really just looks like a smear or a multiple or many frames in one, as you can see sort of its path down, which is really amazing. Here's another one, later work. Again, you have that great haze around those trees. There's that one main tree and then the trees behind it with the white haze around them, which is a great formal device to create depth, but also creates a sense of like this haze, that feeling of space and things vibrating and buzzing. There's that great, the butterfly, if you can see it on the top right, again, you can actually see its path in, and it's very much like a multiple or a smear sort of thing. And then again, you get those sort of speed lines or vibrating lines at the top of the trees, which is amazing. And again, how many patterns, like it's almost like they work so well, his patches of like harmonious patterns, and well within each other, that you don't notice them, but just like the main tree, the yellow part of it with the stars coming in, like it's out of control, but it just fuses in so well to everything. Again, this another one, here's a close-up of the butterfly sort of flying, and you can see the lines radiating from it. And again, on the left, this one's just so simple, but again, it's that feeling. And again, maybe I spent a lot of time walking out in the woods in bad weather and loving it too much, but just how that feeling of the snow is hitting you, there's these, that you can't see through it, but you can see this sort of light, and just like the feeling of being, of this, of the weather. Later on, he started drawing, this was, I think, coming of spring. He started drawing these holes in his paintings, and sort of the next season coming through it. I feel like he did these a lot with coming of spring, some images, but again, you can see through the branches sort of dissolving. Again, that zigzag line that just came a bit more formal. So in his later years, more of his symbols and graphic stuff sort of became more formal and abstract devices. But I thought this was like a really amazing way to show time changing and seasons changing with just having cutaways. Here's another one. So we got the crazy vibrations along with a cutaway in the middle. But yeah, it's like, again, that feeling of like, you can hear that insect buzz. You can just like feel the moisture, that sort of thing. Okay, so he had his great year, 1917. He's at home, he's doing his thing, and a lot of his work was sort of reminiscing about his youth, and he was sort of running out of ideas in a way, or so he felt. And then also in 1918, he joined the army. He was in the army, war going on. He ended up working under Lieutenant William Yarrow, also another artist. They bonded over their appreciation of Cézanne. So Burchfield he was sent to work in the camouflage department designing camouflage. So this is one of something to do with the camouflage design that he did. Here we go. So he came back, year in the army, came back 1918. When he returned home, he was having a hard time just getting back into it and connecting again with getting down with nature. And again, I think it's relatable because of that feeling of sometimes being in nature and you can really feel it and you can see it and feel it. And then those other times when you're so just lost in your petty materialistic thoughts that you can't see what's in front of you and thing just seems dead and cold. But I feel like he lost a bit of that connection. At the time, he was obsessed with the point of view of birds and created a series of works that he showed to Mary Mowbray Clark, who said, these look like the work of someone who is trying to caricature your things. We're just like, ouch, Mary. So he was really depressed. He tore up a bunch of his drawings, which he regretted later. And this is one, he started this is one of the bird sketches, and then he finished it later, and it was about this bird and the egg inside of it. Yeah. Okay, yeah. And then he started painting buildings. He was trying to look for new material. He thought of what his teacher had said about look to your surroundings for inspiration. So here's this depressing painting he sort of drew. But then he also started drawing these great pictures of buildings. And again, he's personifying them. Like all of his stuff, he would go out in nature and try to paint his emotional reaction. So paint, in a sense, what the emotions were giving him, what the nature was giving him, but also there's the idea of projecting. So he's projecting his emotions onto different things, as we all do, by personifying them. So here is some of his early work where he's drawing these houses that are sad, that are creepy, that are surprised, sort of thing. So again, earlier one, way more graphic. And then you get this one here, almost like Philip Guston-y kind of vibes happening. So this is another one of a house, which is kind of amazing. Again, with these really simplified shapes, those pointy shapes leaning to the right, into the symbols and keeping stuff simple. Here's one where he's getting a little more realistic. Again, like amazing design. That the idea of like creating disparate sort of elements. On the left, so straight. Everything is almost put through a straight filter. It's elongated. The icicles are straight. The windows are straight, even though it's a bit round at the top. The house is pointy. The sharp curve around the doorway where there's the green and red. And then if you look on the right, it really accentuates and separates itself from like the droopiness of the roof. Again, another amazing framing device. The trees to the top left of it, they create that sort of dark pocket on the top, which sort of really help frame it. And everything's like droopy, everything's sort of curved, which is really nice to say for, again. Here's some more houses here. And he would just go and observe the houses. And he actually got a bit of a hard time. I think there was one article review that it said like, oh, he must hate these people and hate living there and hate these houses, which he really took offense to. Because I think as much as where you live, you might not like all elements of it. It doesn't mean that you hate it or despise it or have contempt for it. I think it's just being alive and experiencing life. There are good and there are bad, and there's also beauty in dilapidation, and there's beauty in things falling apart and in getting on your nerves and all that kind of stuff. Another beautiful one on the right, great framing device, crazy textures in the trees. Charles Burchfield. Okay, and then towards the end of this, 1919 around, he came up with these conventions for abstract thought. These were a series of drawings that he created of shapes, abstract shapes, that he used to communicate feeling and emotion and that sort of thing. It's not something that he was like, this is my thing, I'm gonna share this with the world, this is an amazing thing I'm creating. It was something more personal that I think with John Bauer, if I'm getting their name right, he was like really into his work, and a friend of his sort of found out about it, and that's how they came into being. But these conventions for abstract thought, they're a lot like Eminata in comics. So there's this great book, Lexicon of Comic-Hana by Mort Locklear, where he did it, and he defines all the Eminata, and it's sort of like tongue-in-cheek. And they're really expensive on eBay right now. If anyone needs some money and has a couple of copies, you might want to sell one, look it up. But anyways, back to the talk. So Eminata, you can see on the bottom, there are these symbols and signs. If you use something enough, it becomes a visual language, but also in itself, the shape of things gives a sense of expression. So man who's with squeens, slightly drunk, you see the little stars. A man with squeens and a squirrel loaded, very drunk. And then you see the guy on the right, very, very drunk, with the bird and all of these sort of things. And then the ones beside that, the waft form of the pie, the heat of the coffee, and even the rays of the sun. So that idea of creating conventions, caricature, all that stuff that he used in his paintings, similar to comics. And of course, Crazy Cat on the top, the classic, the lines for getting hit with the brick, but also the heart that pops out whenever he gets hit on the head. And then, let's lose my guy. So I'm going to show you some stuff in, I'll show you the conventions and then show them in his work. Again, I just can't help myself with his great quotes. So this one at the top, you are completely dead, devoid of any emotional attitude toward nature. Wake up, be bold, make bold caricatures and conventionalizations. He just had great notes to himself. So here is the book. Again, who doesn't love an old cardboardy type notebook? And here's one of the drawings, Dangerous Brooding. So you can see a bit more painterly, a bit more abstract than straight up comics. Then here are some other great ones. So Nostalgia on the left. Then we have Aimless Abstraction and Fascination. I'm going to try to, oh man, okay. And then Fascination on the right. And then there's some great, the memory of pleasant things that are gone and perhaps forever, Nostalgia on the left. Imbecility, I think these were I think Nancy Weekly mentioned that these might be built off of, or a pattern off of doorknobs in his house. Just kind of interesting. And then Insanity on the right. So these there's something about these symbols, like insanity. I don't know if that says insanity to me, but it's like this creature. It's like this little guy. It's so much personality. Menace, we got some fear in the center, and then psychological words, meditation on the right. Melancholy sadness. I love the fear of loneliness. Like this, it's just something about it that's so nice. This shape, hard yet soft shape with those shadows behind it. And then this is great. The escape from the banal of everyday life to the world of the ideal. The rightmost one. And we have surprise, fear again, and then morbid brewing. So I ended on these because I'm going to show you paintings with them. So it's kind of great. And I love, again, that surprise. It does work for me. It's that little square. So here are some images with the morbid brooding. So you can see a little shape in the bottom and sort of at the top of the house. And you can see that in a lot of his houses. He's creating that almost like top of an M shape sort of thing. And then there's another detail from another painting he did with this chair. So you can see the top of the chair right above the bed, jail post bed thing, the white thing on the top of the chair. It looks again like that arced shape. This one, church bells, something, something. Of course, I can't remember it right now. But it's got some great, the blue elements. It's got the fear shapes around it. You have some morbidness on the roof lines and the top of the windows. And then you also have this fear on those archways of the lower window, especially on the left-hand side. So you have those symbols within it. Also, great little pop of color, bottom left, which you also notice. Another funny story about this painting is that the watercolors are not archival. They're an unsteady medium. That's why they're kind of unpopular in the art system, all that stuff. but they faded. So he knew the person who had it in their collection, and he tried to write it and get the painting back so he could fix it. And he wrote, described everything, but they would never give it back to them because they didn't trust him, and they thought he would try to change too much if he got it in his hands. It's kind of funny. Then the last one, so this sweetest little house here. So the eyeballs, again, if you've ever personified a house, I've done it. Where you see the windows as eyes and that sort of thing. So the little windows there with the dark pops between the drapes, those work as the surprise symbol. And again, that arch, that one just arch of snow on the top of the roof edge sort of works as hair. And then even just having a sort of a curved element to everything rather than straight, it's like a bit more organic and cute and human. Which is pretty fantastic. And just kind of a nice tension between the building leaning to the left and then these great maroon brown trees sort of leaning to the right. So simple, but like this great little moment happening. And then where his need to create these symbols, I think it came a lot from his synesthesia. So he is able to hear color and see sound. There's all these quotes in his journals where he talks about looking at autumn leaves. I felt as if color made sound. I know a chestnut tree, which with its peculiar twisting bark is like a bit of music. I have never learned to talk and have only listened to trees. So he talks often about just hearing sound. So I think it came from that as a way not to just why he was so into nature and why it gave him so much and why there was so much intangibleness there to inspire and to challenge him to describe, which really led to his work and his deep connection with it. And there's this great quote. So on his way to work at the Mellon's plant, I suddenly conceived the idea of composing rhythms and colors, not pictorially, but abstractly, so as to suggest ideas. With the proper instrument, the designs can be thrown upon a screen to a large audience who could watch and receive the same sensations as on listening notes. So he's basically describing visual music, which is like abstract music that's set to abstract animation set to music, sort of a representation of the sound. And this got me thinking of the work of William Moritz and the Center of Visual Music. So let's get to that one. Center of Visual Music, William Moritz is like this amazing historian and put a lot of work into studying man's attempts at trying to fuse or express color and sound together, including like color organs. Back in the day, they would have these organs they would play with color lights that would set off if you played a certain note, a tone of music, as well as a lot of abstract animators who created visual music, who were sort of in that world of speaking or drawing sound or speaking pictures, that sort of thing. But yeah, check this out. It's great stuff, William Moritz. He was also really into music. He loved Sibelius. He also loved Wagner in his youth. And this is one from the horn call from the Sibelius Fifth. So he was into trying to draw it in some way, draw shapes to describe what he was seeing or what he was feeling when he listened to it. This is another great piece that I can't remember the name of. Something about hydro lines, but it was about the landscape, but also that sound you hear when you're near electric poles, that vibrating and that buzzing, which it says that I can feel it. I can hear that buzz. I can feel the birds. I can see them going across, that sort of thing. And that hum, that sort of unnoticeable, it takes over your body hum that you hear when you're around electric things and stuff like that. So just really beautiful. Again, just bringing it down to like a repeated pattern that speaks to what the thing he's trying to express, but also is like the killer design of showing like depth through it getting smaller, of creating again patches of harmonious repeated pattern that work as these beautiful patches that work like together and against each other, and it's just beautiful. Okay, so here's another one. The one on the left is a bit older work. I think it's 48. One on the right is 1917. So again, you can see the more like graphic line. I think this was music of cicadas in both of them. So it's that sound, that buzz sound you hear, and sort of trying to describe it, vibrating from things. This is Song of the Swamp. So a nice sketch of like what the sound of the swamp would look like, what the feeling, the atmosphere of it is. Again, he was really into birds and the sounds of birds and insects creating the atmosphere of stuff, and just also thinking about the point of view of birds and coming at it from that angle. He had a bunch of drawings he did about that. And then again, this is the red bird, and you can sort of see it vibrating and singing throughout it. And again, all those little tricks, like the trees right in the center in the background, you can see them sort of disappearing with that zigzag pattern and stuff like that, which is really nice. Oh yeah, so then he kept working into working on stuff. Stuff's getting a bit more realistic with buildings. In 1920, he ends up moving to Buffalo, New York, to work as a designer at a wallpaper factory or company called M.H. Burge and Sons. He didn't really like the job. He's an introvert. He doesn't like having to deal with like human petty office stuff, it felt like, or being in charge of people, that sort of thing. And he was sort of, his job was to create the weird line, the oddball line, the specialty line, as well as like going over other people's work. So here's some great, like amazing examples. I don't think he ever thought too highly of them, but they blow me away. It's amazing stuff. And then, oh yeah, here's some more beautiful patterns he made. And again, he's just like, to have blue and orange, these colors that bounce off of each other, working so well together in something. And really, because it's like he's matching the tones of things, the darker sunflower tones separated from the mid tones of the leaf, the blue and orange on the leaf. It's just like it's able to have all of these wild color compositions work together in a solid, calm way, sort of thing. Here is one of the few oil paintings he did. I think he dabbled in oil a bit. Everything again is filtered through my own brain, and I relate it to myself. So when I think of it, I think oil. He's trying to broaden his practice and sort of giving into that idea. Again, watercolors was seen as more of a lowly form of art. It wasn't archival. It was used by cartographers and like young hobbyist women, sort of like because it allowed for like expressiveness and going out into the field and doing scenic paintings and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking he sort of tried to dip into oils to just see if he could do it, if he could live up to this idea of these monumental oils. Oh my God, that sort of thing. So amazing painting, but it didn't last long, and he went back to watercolor. But a lot of the same things are happening. Again, the crispness of the reflections in the water versus the sort of a bit more dulled out haziness of the building. It just really gives it this sort of realism and separates those two pieces: the water, the shiny liquid water surface, and the solid sort of brick and wood sort of land. So it's really nice. A lot of his stuff, this is 1935. A lot of his stuff, you can see there's a lot of he does reflections and waters, from like super simple stuff to more realistic stuff. Here's some more watercolors that were again more grounded, more solid, and it was really sort of almost, it feels like challenging himself. He was trying to go against his looser, as much as he loved his looser stuff earlier on and people loved it. It was that challenge of like, well, can I do more solid stuff? And really got a solidity to his drawings, his paintings that he worked out. And then this is a sketch, skunk squash, something like that, skunk plant on the right. Again, they're just like so solid and beautiful, with clear points of focus. On that one on the left, it's like it could be a scene in an animation or comic. It's giving you this this area to act in, like that stream coming down that's leading you into the bright part in the middle, that yellow streak of the hill, the grass, whatever. But it's just really nice. It's a scene. It feels alive. It feels like a moment. So after he got into realism, he's working at the wallpaper company. He got married to Bertha. They had like 5 kids, I think. He's just living his life. He's sort of knocking out these paintings. He's getting some accolades and stuff like that. And then I think it's in the 30s that he decides to quit his job. He hooks up with this dealer. And I think he had a show at the MoMA, which I don't think he went to the opening to, because he was like, I can't deal with this. In the 30s, so he's getting a bit of recognition. He decides to quit his job and just focus on painting full time. And he's doing his stuff. He's trying again to get back into it. And he looks back at his old sketches and his drawings from 1917, 19, that area, pulls them out of his crazy archive he has, and starts rebuilding them. Again, that idea of this remaking himself, always morphing, sculptural process. So he would take drawings and build them out, glue pieces of paper onto them and extend the drawings. You can see a plan for one on the left, and then one sort of just glued and sketched on the right. At first, he started sort of mimicking his old style in brush strokes. And then he started mixing in more of his more contemporary brush strokes into it. And then after he sort of went through this phase of redoing the pictures, doing these build-ups sort of thing, he went back to just straight drawing and painting, but it almost like freed his style, where he went back to looser and more like lyrical and wild imagery. And then, let's see. Yeah, set my points. Here's one that's rebuilt sort of in action. You can see that one part bottom middle and how it's built up around it. And again, love a Burchfield quote. So here, to me now, the 1920-1940 period, roughly speaking, has been a digression, a necessary one, but not truly in the mainstream that I feel I am destined to travel. During that middle period, I was searching for an appreciation of form and solidity and a painting quality that the 1917 things lacked. Now it seems to me I'm in danger of painting too realistically, and I must try to recapture the first imaginative and romantic outlook and even go beyond the scope of that period. So yeah, that's that. And here's some more remakes. And again, you can see that what he's brought, I don't think it was a waste of time, the realistic period, but the solidity to it, and how that's his crazy brushwork, more open brushwork, more symbolic and graphic is sort of being merged with it. And again, bringing those great, in the center of this image, the tree trunks that are just these great dark silhouettes, like how insanely strong that is, and just bringing that in and just like casually melding it into everything, which is really nice. And again, too, you can see in the water. So you have that mix of the haze, these hazy elements with that crispness of the water. That really evokes the crispness of water, the mirrored effect of water. And somehow it seems, when you see a reflection of a tree in it, it seems crisper and more real and clear than looking at it through the haze of what it's really standing in front of you. Also just like a great way to bring those eyeballs in and then bring them on up to that sun. The one on the right, again, another remake with some great bird patterns. You can see he's bringing in again those symbols, but more abstract, less like a straight up symbol or graphic representation, going more towards like just fluid abstraction, that kind of thing. Here's a great one. So, oh yeah, the Black Hollow, which is like that idea of a black hollow, a hole in something and really being drawn to it. And sort of representing the mystery. So here he's sort of getting back into it and getting back into things that inspired him and bringing in more graphic patterns and imagery and textures to meld with his sort of realism. And you can see the top left again, that sort of cutaway, this cool cutaway thing he's doing where it's like cutaway through the haze or cutaway through time. I'm not sure, but I love it. Okay. So here, oh yeah, and here's another great one. This was, I think it might be a remake. I always have to look for those lines to put it together. I believe this is the one that was about sort of God's anger at man. So he was a spiritual guy, but he wasn't really into organized religion. People refer to him as like a pantheist and naturalist, that sort of thing. His dad was like a minister in the Methodist church, pastor in the Methodist church. So his dad sort of like rebelled against that, was not into the orthodoxy of it all. So he sort of came from that point of view. Also, his dad died when he was 5 years old, and he had to move back with his mom and his 5 siblings to Salem, Ohio. And his mom, he always felt a bit not included, but in the church community, because she was like a single mom and that sort of thing. So he was never really that into organized religion, but he's very spiritual, Christian. I believe he would like read the Bible and that sort of thing, but like on his own time in his own way. And nature to him was like sort of the spiritual thing, this way to connect to a greater power, and speak through it and that sort of thing, I believe, in my humble opinion. Here's again another later piece, which again is so solid, and it's a sort of almost realism with these little hints of these amazing graphic shapes, but it's kind of great. Like there's ones you see that are very graphic with a little bit of realism, but this one is so real to me, and that it's almost like you have to look at it and be like, oh my god, yeah, that's a crazy tree shape. Oh, the tree trunk in the middle left, that's a cartoon, the way that shape is going, that sort of thing, which is really nice. And again, using those like high points of contrast, that little bush in the bottom towards the right, against the sort of hazy ones, top, middle, the tree sticking out from the cliff sort of thing, really bouncing those off each other. And then this is another wild one. I think this is in the 51. So again, really sort of freed him, and he got back to expressive style and really creating, like, I don't know what's going on, but I know where it's moving. I know there's a thing moving at the top. I know there's some insects jamming in the bottom middle, something happening over there. So things are separated, things are moving. It's like, it's amazing. And then here's some more pieces. Again, the one on the left, it's just that idea of, I don't know, you just can capture that feeling of like a season or sun, and the sun hitting this beautiful, pretty realistic traditional house on the left, but then you look at this crazy symbol on the right that looks almost like some kind of culty thing, but really nice. And again, really just working, doing its job, working together, working on it. It's like a plane. I love these trees he does on the right. They're just, I love me some bark, but like this is just so good. And then again, that framing device with the little house peeking out in the back is really nice. More works, vibrating lines, getting free with it, kind of amazing. And I'm just gonna flip through the last, maybe I won't do them all. Here's one a bit crazier. Let's see what we got. Oh yeah, this is an older one too. Again, like those killer like patterns on the trees. This is like spring rain, I think. And again, that feeling of a dark sky, but it's really bright, like freaky light when it rains in the summer or a big thunderstorm comes. This one on the left kills me. I love it so much. I do come from the winter country, but it is very much of like that light through crisp, cold air, and that sort of like clean light, and the haze, clean light and haze. But yeah, that clean, crispy light, which is really nice. But yeah, I have a bunch more. I've talked for a bunch, but I'll just flip these through you to make you go online and look for them yourselves. That's some great stuff. Oh yeah, one on this, great little zigzags on the tree. And that's all I got.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. That was great. That was beautiful to see. I consider myself a Charles Burchfield fan, as I'm sure a lot of people in the audience do, but so much of that I'd never seen before. And it was beautiful to see. It was beautiful to see so much of it. I have a bunch of questions. I'm going to limit myself to starting off with one. I encourage other people to put a question in the chat if they like, but I was going to start off by asking you, you keep coming back to this idea of, realism and then art being, something with a non-realistic approach, potentially being more real. And I think Burchfield is a great person to talk about that with, because it is representing nature, but it's like its own form of nature. It's like its own independent, like nature entity. And I was wondering if that's something in your own work that you think about, like representing things that are almost more real. I mean, I don't want to bring this up again, but it's a drawing of a small puppy, and when I look at it, it's more, it feels like the ultimate representation of a puppy in some kind of way.
Okay, yeah, my light is really bad. Anyways, yeah, yeah, so okay, I'll try. So Birchfield, I feel like first your comment of like, oh my god, so much stuff you hadn't seen, that was like the craziest thing working on this. I guess he has like 4,000 pieces, and it's like no matter how much you dig, there's like so much more. It was driving me insane. And don't, like, if you really want to get into it, look at like the Sotheby's and all the auction houses too. They always like come up with these crazy ones you've never seen before. The idea of exaggeration and caricature, and it being more truthful than scientific objective reality. I feel like for me that it's like what I see is through my perceptions. It's through my own filter. So for me to pretend that there is any objective truth, or that I can see things objectively, or that I can use science to find truth, seems very silly, because it's like my truth is what I'm perceiving, if that makes sense. So it's almost like admitting your fallibility is more honest and more truthful to your perception. And then I think it does the reality, the things of being real, hitting that sweet spot between realism and cartoon. I love it. Yeah, because it sort of hits a spot of, again, things that are realistic and real and our physical reality, what I can touch and see. That's one way of understanding the world. But my bigger understanding of the world, my bigger way of navigating the world, is all these social conventions and rules and abstract ways of being that are really my reality. You know what I mean? Are often more real than like the physical reality of things. So I think for me, that's what it sort of hits on, and what I'm drawn to when things can sort of hit that uncanny valley, or hit those drawings, especially like weird kooky drawings that like look very real but then are also very abstracted, or combine like comics abstraction with realism sort of thing. I just like that. It's like admitting to the muddiness of life or something.
You were talking about how he there was a moment where you were explicitly relating him to having elements that are cartoony, or have stuff in common with animation and comics, and you were very approving of it. You were saying that's good, and I'm wondering a little bit about your own journey to making comics, or being drawn to animation and comics yourself. Because you see, like, it's watching it, seemed like such an obvious connection to Ty Burchfield, to that that Walker book. I've never thought about that before, and I've seen that. I knew that Burchfield had those symbols, but to tie him to cartooning is such an obvious thing, and you seemed appreciative of that connection. So I'm just kind of wondering what your early on, what drew you to, because you work in so many different mediums, what drew you to comics and animation?
Oh my God. What drew me to comics? No, I just had a thought. I was very shy, and I was in a film class, and I didn't want to have to boss people around. And if I did animation, it was this thing I could control and do on my own sort of thing. I think that's what kind of did it. And then also just animation, I would have ideas, and they would be more movements and gestures, and then they would be still images. And then I think it's also just a tie into moving away from like art pretense. You know what I mean? And something that's more accessible. Accessibility has always been a big thing for me. In art school, I just remember I took classes with Helen Hill through this film co-op, and it was just like this beautiful thing. She was like an amazing teacher, where she would treat everyone like peers. You know what I mean? And we were all in it together, and there was this lack of sort of hierarchy, and just the just the accessibility, but and just like showing my film somewhere, and people could just come in and just react to it, like they didn't have to understand in any way, and I could make someone laugh, I could physically touch them without touching them. Do you know what I mean? So I just loved that. And just the fact that I think what I love about Burchfield's work too is that he created this amazing body of work, and he's just stuck to what interested him without being too pulled too much or having to pretend to be something he's not. And I grew up watching TV, watching cartoons, reading comics. That's my art history. That's my visual language. That's things that are very real to me, and what I speak through, and references and all that sort of abstract codes and all that stuff. So I think that's what really, in a lot of ways, brings me to comics and zines and all that stuff, because it is accessible, and it is honestly what really formed me when I was a child, you know.
Did he, you know, you mentioned that he didn't want to go to the opening at MoMA or things like that, or that he was a bit introverted. What did he think about his work in terms of interacting with other people? You know, did he want to communicate and interact, or was it his own kind of, what was it, a project that wasn't concerned with that?
Okay, I'm gonna kind of guesstimate, but I think he wasn't so much concerned with it. I think he would become overwhelmed. Like, he didn't want to go to the opening because he's like, oh my God, it's just going to be too much. It's going to, I don't know, like, so I can relate. Like, if I go to some social thing, I'm like, am I really going to go to that? Because that's going to derail me for a day. Like, I'm going to be like processing this energy and like, blah, taking all this stuff in. So I think he just really wanted to be out in the woods alone, painting and experiencing things. And it was very much challenging himself and lost in his own mythology, not in so much of a mythology of a scene, but in his own, challenging himself and, you know, writing these like amazing comments to himself and stuff like that. Yeah.
I'm going to read some of the people are making a lot of comments, but no one's asking a question, but I'm going to read their comments to you so you can hear them. Paula says, thank you, with many exclamation points. Benjamin Fraser says, great talk. Thanks, Amy. Burchfield was new for me, and I enjoyed the comics connections as well. And Ellen says, thank you so much for a wonderful, articulate presentation. I have loved Burchfield's work since I discovered it over 50 years ago. I've never seen so many examples of his work as you've shown us. His vision is so singular. Thank you. And I agree. I hadn't seen as much of that work as you showed tonight. I don't mind if you're guesstimating the answer to this question, but I'm interested in your view. With the symbols he was using to represent certain things, I've always kind of thought of, like, I've just seeing it in museums or around, I've always like assumed that he worked in a very improvisational way, like working intuitively, and then, you know, editing and making, you know, building the composition with some improvisation embedded. I have no idea. But with those symbols, it would seem that they needed to be built and constructed with less improvisation, maybe. So what do you think?
I'm wondering too, like, when I think of this, the swoopy morbidness on the roofs sort of thing, I feel like that can be like an intuitive thing. Like, you know, when you got something going on in your drawing certain time period, and like, I'm drawing everything in a certain way, like everything really droopy. It's like almost putting it through a filter. So I almost feel like it's there. And then he just sort of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put a little droop on these, really like bring it home, because it reminds me of that. I feel like with the church one, there was more thinking going into it, because he talks a lot about church bells, and that was one more critical of religion, and just like the I think he describes in one quote about like the morbidness of the clanging bells or something like that. So I think like bringing that shape around it, it felt a bit more thought out, and there was a lot more sketches about it. John Bauer book goes into like analyzing it and all that stuff. So I think there was more preparatory sketches, more thoughts about how he could put it into it in that one.
That makes sense. I was gonna ask, you know, you showed those amazing animation smears, and because you teach animation now and you are an animator yourself, maybe you could tell me I'm way off, but whenever I look at that period of animation, and especially those animation spheres, it's just beyond beautiful to me. And with contemporary anime, and you know, that like the Looney Tunes stuff, that was like super commercial and mainstream. I just can't. Sometimes you look at those cartoons and you're just like, you can't believe that they did that. And then when I look at contemporary commercial animation, it seems the visual beauty of it seems to have fallen away a little bit. That's just something, as a non-animator and someone not working within animation, I have that conservative, like, oh, it was so much better back then. And I'm wondering what you think, and if what are maybe reasons for mainstream animation, at least. You're in Chicago, and Lily Carre has done that experimental animation festival, iWorks, and when I see that seems, the work that she curates, that seems beyond visual beauty, equaling the work from the past. But I'm wondering what you think, if you see these trends as well, or if you see something different.
I get what you're saying. Like, I think it's because but you have to check out Bob Clampett. That the frying pan one was him, but he's like such an amazing character to check out. Wild animator, and also like he was really good at animation, and then all of a sudden he decided he wanted to make a film that was like live action with animation, and it totally never was made. There's like some stuff you can find online. I love someone who tries something and fails, but he just seemed like a wild guy. Anyways, oh yeah, so back in the day, I think why it was so good, especially like Fleischer stuff, and like Dave Fleischer, and all the innovations they made, is because they had such limited means, and it was a made by hand sort of thing. So I think it gave it this beauty to it, like how much can you do with just paint, or like a Dave Fleischer sort of kind of inventing rotoscope. Maybe I'll go and so far to say that, like the Coco the Clown thing. So he got on the roof once dressed up as a clown, they filmed him, and then they rotoscoped it. So there's something about where it feels more interesting, because it feels to me more like people with a limited amount of means, like jerry rigging stuff and figuring it out. Now I feel like a lot of like those processes, a lot of anime too, like Serial Experiments Lane, I think it was the 90s. There's so many just still shots that are just vibrating. But it's like so beautiful. But I think now everything's become so, I don't know, industrialized isn't the right word, but like tech, you know what I mean? Where you have these programs doing it, and you're not even like, they tween the stuff for you. So that, you pick the start and the end, and then it's a sort of automatic thing. And you can make it ease in and ease out sort of thing, but it's still very mechanical. So I feel like it's sort of been taken over by that, and it's about money. You know what I mean? Like back in the day when they were making Bugs Bunny and everything, they were coming up with these creative shortcuts to be able to produce it, and also probably not paying people well, and they're getting pneumonia and all these buildings and stuff like that. But now it's like they're just going to like software. You know what I mean? So it just gives it, and it's just all about like pumping out content. So now when I look at stuff like that, I like stuff, but I like more like the weird stuff on YouTube, or the weird, like almost it's so bad it's good kind of stuff. So I think that's where I find what's interesting in like kind of indie stuff like that. And like games and stuff like that. But yeah, I know, I think it's sort of like the humanness is lost, and it's more in this sort of alienated software land that kind of kills it, I think, now.
What if you have a student that wants to make animation that's as beautiful as Charles Burchfield, that really is taking what you're saying here seriously, and maybe communicating a personal, more real than real vision within animation? You have a student who's interested in this, but they also want to make some kind of living. Is there a way to, I don't know, I think about it so much with animation, where it's like there must be some in between path maybe for that to happen, and that maybe I'm just unaware of. But maybe it really is like comics, where the most artistic stuff does have to be completely not worrying about paying the bills with it.
I think it's really luck of the draw plus connections, social connections, and what you're born into. So you can do more wild and wacky stuff if you come from a more respectable place, status, or whatever, because they'll be like, oh my God, you're a genius, this is amazing. And that might get on TV, and like we see some like crazy weird stuff. But I feel like a lot of like sort of the people, unless you have that door in or that connection, you're just seen as like crazy and whatever. So and maybe there is a shot of doing it, but I would tell them to, like, what other skills do you have? Like, are you good at math? Become an accountant, do that job. It's a seasonal job, and then you don't have to give a crap what other people think, and you can do whatever you want. Like, I would go that route more than fighting the system, unless you're born into like a trust fund, or you know what I mean, or like have family connections that can get you there. But I don't think it's worth the fight in a way. I think that's what I love about Burchfield, is that he didn't ask for permission. He just like did his own thing, and he did it like so hardcore and was dedicated to it that it just became this amazingly epic thing. You know what I mean? And he didn't waste his time trying to make people accept him.
Yeah, and I'm still like, I think everyone probably is just still processing all those images you showed. I really just the commitment to it was incredible seeing that stuff, because not just the commitment to make the work, but to make, so sometimes when you're going through like a ton of someone's imagery, you're like, oh well, here's one that didn't work out, here's one that, but all that stuff you showed, it was all at such a it's such an incredible level, and it makes me, I miss the Burchfield exhibit at the Whitney when it was in New York, and I've always regretted it. Now I regret it even more. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for showing us.
I'm glad you like the image. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah. I'm just thanking you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're slowing down a bit, but I was going to say thanks.
Okay.
I'm glad you appreciated the images. I was stressed out about what I was going to show, because there's just so much to show, and I was like, oh my god, which ones do I include or not? So I'm glad it was good and stuff people hadn't seen. So it's good. Can't go wrong with Burchfield.
It was beautiful. Thank you so much, Amy. And next week is the last week of the symposium. I will not be doing it. Ben Catcher will be talking to Alexandra Robb about graphic journalism. So make sure to, in the same way you registered for this, you can register for that. And thank you again, Amy.
Thank you.
It was incredible.
It's a great convention. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.